All right, let's dive into something huge and honestly pretty personal today. We're asking the question, who told you God is angry? We're going to unpack this whole idea using a really fascinating source text. Really think about it for a second. Have you ever felt like God is just angry with you? Maybe things in your life are going wrong and you hear that little voice in your head whispering, God's probably punishing you for that thing you did. This idea of a temperamental kind of punishing God is, well, it's everywhere. And look, this isn't just some passing thought. So many people live with this constant, low-grade fear, always interpreting hardship or unanswered prayers or just making a mistake as proof that God is fed up with them. It becomes this massive roadblock.
So here's where we hit a major conflict. An angry God can only inspire one thing, right? Fear. You're always on edge, anxious, just trying not to mess up. But the Bible is really clear, especially in Hebrews 11:6, that without faith it is impossible to please God. You see the problem? You can't really be walking in faith if you're totally paralyzed by fear. The two just don't mix.
Okay, so where did this whole idea of an angry God even come from? To get to the bottom of this, our text points us to a simple but really powerful tool for investigation, the law of first mention. The basic idea is that the very first time a word shows up in the Bible, it tells you a lot about its true origin and its core meaning. And when you apply this, what you find is, well, it's pretty wild. The first time we see the word good in Genesis chapter 1, it's connected directly to God. God saw the light that it was good. Goodness comes from God. But the first time we see the word anger, that shows up in Genesis chapter 4 with Cain, a man. So it asks this brilliant question. If anger started with man, did God somehow pick up a bad habit from us? So to really crack this code, we need one single crucial interpretive key. And that key is this idea of Jesus as the university of God. What does that even mean? Well, think of it like this. If you want to learn physics, you enroll in a university, right? You go to the experts. If you want to really learn about God, to get the full, unfiltered, complete picture of his character, you have to enroll in Jesus. He is the full curriculum. And this isn't just some cute metaphor. Jesus said it himself. In John chapter 14, when his disciple Philip says, "Hey, just show us the Father," Jesus' response is basically, "Are you kidding me? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father." So here's the bottom line. To know what God is like, you look at Jesus. Period. Okay, that immediately brings up an obvious question, doesn't it? Because there are a couple of really famous stories where Jesus seems, pretty angry. So let's do what any good investigator would do and look at the actual evidence. We're going to dive into two key case studies. First up, the big one, the cleansing of the temple. This is probably the number one example people point to as proof that Jesus, and by extension, God, has a serious temper. You know the scene, right? Jesus walks into the temple, sees all the buying and selling, and just goes to town, flipping tables, driving people out with a whip. On the surface, it looks like a total classic case of holy rage. So the question is, was this really an emotional outburst? Was Jesus just losing his cool, even if it was for a good reason? Or was there something else entirely going on? Well, the answer is a big, resounding no. This was not an active temper. It was a deliberate, live-action teaching, a demonstration. Everything Jesus did was calculated to reveal something profound. So what was he teaching? Well, for starters, he was physically acting out a prophecy from the book of Isaiah. By clearing out all that commerce, he was making a powerful statement. This house, this temple, is supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations, not just for one group. He was literally breaking down a barrier. Second, and this is a really important detail, the people selling the animals weren't some rogue outlaws. They were actually following an old rule from Deuteronomy 14 that allowed for this. So Jesus wasn't mad at them for breaking a law, he was physically demonstrating that the entire system of animal sacrifice was becoming obsolete. He was shutting it down. And all of this builds to his ultimate point. When they confronted him, he said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And the text is clear. He wasn't talking about the stone building. He was talking about his own body. The lesson was crystal clear. Worship isn't about a building anymore. It's about him. It was a lesson, not a tantrum. All right, let's move on to our second case study, the very curious incident of the cursed fig tree. This is another one that, on the surface, seems to paint a picture of a pretty irritable Jesus.
So the story goes, Jesus is hungry. He walks up to a fig tree looking for a snack, finds no fruit on it, even though it wasn't even the right season for figs, and he basically zaps it, saying, "No one will ever eat from you again." And it withers up and dies.
So, was he just hangry? We've all been there. Did he get frustrated and just take it out on an innocent plant? Or, again, is it possible we're missing the point?
Well, let's look at Jesus' own explanation. The next day, when his disciples are just marveling at this withered tree, his response has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with being hungry. He immediately pivots and says, "Have faith in God." You see, he was using the fig tree as a visual aid. It was a live action demonstration for his disciples on the incredible power of their own faith-filled words. He literally used it as a prop to teach them that they could speak to mountains and see them move. The tree wasn't the target. It was the chalkboard for his lesson on faith. So, after looking at all the evidence and seeing it through this lens of Jesus being the ultimate revelation of God, what's our final takeaway? What's the bottom line? In both of these famous cases, what we might mistake for temper was actually a teaching. Jesus wasn't modeling an angry, punishing God. He was demonstrating profound truths about a whole new way to relate to God. In fact, Jesus described himself as gentle and lowly in heart. That doesn't sound like an angry God at all.
And that leaves us with one last, big, provocative question to chew on. If the God that Jesus reveals isn't angry, isn't short-tempered, and isn't just looking for reasons to punish you, then what does that change for you? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.